Welcome back. My name is Aaron Wills. This is our third show in a series of shows entitled Rehabilitation Coming Soon, where we have been discussing the mass incarceration practices of the United States, and in particular, the effect of those practices on the state of Hawaii. The first week we discussed the most successful prison system in the world with Bob Morse, as he shared his experiences visiting the Norway prison system. Last week, our guest was Dr. Mita Chesney-Lin, who discussed a wide range of topics ranging from our current jail population here in Hawaii to some simple solutions to help reduce our prison population of nonviolent offenders. This week, we will discuss the family dynamics of children of incarcerated parents. A nonprofit organization by the name of Blueprint for Change has a mission to prevent child abuse and neglect in families where children are at risk of abuse and neglect because one or both of the parents are incarcerated. So our topic this week will be ending the generational cycle of incarceration. Our guests are Stephen Morse and Kukuna Yoshimoto. Stephen Morse is a longtime social worker and advocate since the early 70s. He helped found the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation and served as director until 1979. He has worked at QLCC, OHA, and Alulike. Since 2008, Steve has been the executive director of a nonprofit social service organization called Blueprint for Change, whose mission is to prevent child abuse and neglect in Hawaii. Blueprint for Change started working with children of incarcerated parents several years ago because the families being served statewide, many of whom are Native Hawaiian, were at risk of neglect and abuse because one or both parents were incarcerated. And since July 2015, Steve's group has been participating with the Holomua Pu'uhonua, which is focused on incorporating Hawaiian cultural values, practices, and principles into programs serving offenders and ex-offenders. Kukuna Yoshimoto is a Native Hawaiian social worker who has worked with children of incarcerated parents through Malama Pono. In 2012, Kukuna returned to school and obtained a master's degree in social work. Kukuna is also involved with the group Holomua Pu'uhonua and was tasked with the job of fleshing out the details of Act 117, which we'll go into later. The group worked on and submitted a federal grant proposal to create a core curriculum grounded in Native Hawaiian values, practices, and principles, in hopes to disseminate this curriculum to programs and organizations who are and plan to work with the children of incarcerated parents, as well as to address the disparate treatment of Native Hawaiians in the criminal justice system. So welcome to the show, Stephen.
Hello, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Well, we'll start with you, Steve. I just wanted to let you tell us a little bit about Blueprint for Change and how you became involved in working with children of incarcerated parents.
Blueprint for Change was formed in the year 2000. It was became part of a child reform movement in the state of Hawaii at the time, where we moved toward more a prevention, intervention, differential response system. And we became a master contractor. The state was looking at developing innovative programs on a community base statewide and needed someone to help administer, manage, and provide the fiscal support. So Blueprint for Change was formed in 2000 to serve as the Department of Human Services master contractor. Okay. And thankfully, we have served in that capacity ever since. A few years ago, one of our jobs, besides serving families in those communities where they're called neighborhood places,
right.
And besides serving families who are at risk of child abuse and neglect and helping divert them away from the child welfare system, one of our jobs that we take very seriously is looking at what kinds of trends and new problems are arising on a community level regarding child welfare.
Okay.
And in our reports coming back from the neighborhood places, quarterly activity reports, we began seeing a trend in their serving families which were impacted by incarceration. So the children we saw as they're being at risk of not so much abuse, but in many cases neglect, and in some cases abuse. You know, if they're farmed out or they're fostered out, there's a potential for abuse and neglect in some of those families.
Right.
So we began taking a look at what we could do to address this trend, and we're basically try and do more research and find out how big this problem was.
Okay. just because we were kind of talking about this before the show, just recently you were allowed to collect some certain data. It kind of shows you how big the actual problem really is. Could you
Exactly.
explain a little bit about that?
Well, you know, when we started doing research a few years ago, we found no data, which was pretty amazing to us. Most of what we were able to glean and extrapolate came from mainland databases, and we found it very surprising that we had no databases in Hawaii
And
that we
what
could
data
glean.
specifically?
We're looking at, you know, the number of children, how many you know, parents are incarcerated, how many parents there are incarcerated right now,
Right.
and how many children there are who are impacted by incarceration.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's all we need. That's all we wanted to know. We couldn't even find out those two pieces of information. And the harder we looked, we came up empty. So I began kind of a collaborative effort among 25 different social service providers. We began sitting down and looking, and we established as one of our priorities that the creation of a database. And we went about the process of trying to find out where we could start doing that. The more we delved into it, the more we basically came up saying, you know, the easiest approach is if we just went to the Department of Public Safety and had these two questions: are you a parent, and how many children under the age of 18 do you have, and put them on their intake forms when they come into the prison and the correction system. Just ask those two questions. You know? We were able to get a bill passed the 2015 legislative session, which requires the Department of Public Safety now to add those two questions to the intake form. At the time, these folks enter the jail system, so it's OCCC, all the CCCs, they're called the jails, right? Statewide.
Right, yeah.
So all the CCCs statewide. And so now they're required at every intake to collect that data. Two questions: are you a parent? How many children under the age of 18 do you have? So we have data now for almost a little over a year right now, in terms of how many children we're talking about and how many parents we're talking about.
Okay.
Not the total picture, but we're beginning to create a baseline, I think, for what the scope of the problem is.
Okay. And is there a raw number out there right now that you could tell us? How many
Amazing numbers. I mean, it basically more than what we expected. The data set I have available right now is just from the months of January 2015 to July 2015, just a 6-7 month segment of time.
7 months.
So of the intakes coming in, there was something like 2,036 intakes over that period of time, statewide. About 60% indicated they were parents, and 1,440 children impacted.
Wow, and that's about 6 months' time. So if you figure if you just double that, you're looking at about
2,880 a year.
A year.
Yeah.
That is a lot of children.
That's a lot of children. So we were not surprised, but we were kind of surprised at the extent of it. Yeah. We knew the numbers were going to be high.
Yeah. Well, to shoot this over to Kukuna, tell me a little bit how you became involved with Steve and working with Blueprint for Change.
So my second year of grad school, my practicum advisor actually encouraged me to meet with this guy, knowing she knew where I wanted to head, what direction I wanted to do, what kind of social work practice I wanted to do in my future. So she knew that Stephen was a Native Hawaiian social worker, rooted in cultural practices and values. So I met with him, spent about an hour just talking, getting to know each other, seeing if I was a right fit for Blueprint, and it ended up being a right fit. So I was with him the school year 2011-2012 as his practicum student for 1 year. And I learned a lot about child abuse and neglect prevention, working with Native Hawaiian communities, and macro social work practices. And since November 2015, came full circle and was hired as his program specialist, and have been working along with him with the Pu'uhonua.
Okay. And you recently, you were involved with writing a federal grant for any other special services?
Yes. Actually, my first federal grant, so I'm kind of really proud of it.
But did a good job. Good job.
So it's to the Administration for Native Americans, and Basically, we took Act 117, which we'll talk about later, and we looked at what the purpose of Act 117 was and tried to align what we wanted to do with that.
Okay.
And so we wrote the grant, really focused on developing a curriculum, a core curriculum, like you mentioned earlier, that will be the foundation of this bigger kind of picture of Pu'uhonua.
Okay.
So we're crossing our fingers and hoping that some funding comes through and we can get this going.
And something that you can implement statewide so that
Absolutely.
all the kids
Absolutely.
of incarcerated parents
Absolutely.
can
So
actually
it's
benefit.
one small step towards
Right.
that bigger picture, but a crucial step.
Okay, well, this question is for both of you, and as you both are well aware, children of incarcerated parents are in a statistical range of about 70 to 80% more likely to be arrested and enter the penal system if one or both of their parents are incarcerated. So if you could both let us know how you think this problem might be tackled in Hawaii, and what you currently doing to address the vicious cycle of generational incarceration.
I would say our strategies are twofold. One is to address the needs of the child itself.
Okay.
And to that extent, we've been working with our collaboration partners that include Keikioka Aina, Family Programs Hawaii, Alulike, Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center. There's about 25 different children and family serving agencies that are part of our collaboration. We actually have a name for it. It's called the Family Reunification Working Group.
Okay.
And we've been at it for about 2 years, and I'm very solution oriented. The older I get, the more solution oriented I get. I don't know how much more time I have, right? So very solution oriented. And we've been working on two fronts, basically. One is providing services, the support services that the children need. And the needs of this population of children is so diverse. I mean, it's every day I find a different need that they have that goes unserved sometimes. So we've been involved with Keikioka Aina in having conferences where we actually, the last conference in February, actually training the service providers that attended. We had training sessions in basically how to work with this group of children because they have such special needs. The other strategy is to basically get their parents home. Those
Right.
parents are incarcerated. We need to get them home,
Right.
you know. And right now with the mentality, I think, unfortunately, in our community and in our prison system is to lock them up and throw away the key. And I don't think the community fully realizes the cost, not just the hard cost of how much the expensive it is for incarceration is to the state of Hawaii, but the hidden costs and the hidden victims, which are the children and the families left behind, So we've been involved with groups like Holomua, looking at alternatives to prison and bringing online more promising community-based practices that really show that they are making a difference in changing and transforming behaviors so that we can get these men and women back reunified with their families.
Okay, and we will be right back with Steve and Kukuna. My name is Aaron Wills, and this is Rehabilitation Coming Soon. Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on Think Tech Hawaii every Friday at 3 p.m. We address issues of importance for those of us who live here on the most isolated landmass on the planet. Please come join me Fridays at 3 p.m. Mahalo.
Aloha, welcome to Think Tech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, citizen journalism from Hawaii, finding the intersection of our sense of place and our place in the world, right here at home. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.
Welcome back. I'm Aaron Wills. This is Rehabilitation Coming Soon, and we're sitting here with our guests, Steve Morse and Kukuna Yoshimoto. I just wanted to continue with the same kind of question we were talking about, because you brought up something important about cost. And as we know, to house a prisoner here in the state of Hawaii, it's anywhere between the range of about $50,000 and $70,000 a year. But as we were talking downstairs, there's a little bigger issue here, because the statistics for single parents is that single mothers are higher statistically than single fathers. So there's a lot of single mothers here in the state of Hawaii. When one of those mothers goes into prison, specifically, I wanted to talk about what you know about the cost of being to house, the kids into the foster care system, to take care of them for a year. If you know any numbers, that would be great.
The last numbers I heard was pretty much equivalent to what it costs to incarcerate an individual, about $70,000 a year for a child in foster care right now. So those, they get placed with a foster family. So those are all the costs associated with, the direct and the indirect costs. If you add up the values of both, they're probably $70,000 a year.
And if a girl happens to have 3 kids, you're talking about $210,000 on top of whatever her incarceration is. So you're talking about close to $300,000 for one family per year. Okay. Now, I just wanted to talk, specifically, get down to the kind of nitty gritty, and neither one of you guys can answer this question. Have you guys worked with the actual children of incarcerated parents, and how many children have you been able to work with, like approximately?
Yeah, sure. So after I graduated with my bachelor's, I was hired by Honolulu Community Action Program.
Okay.
They had a federal grant from Mentor, and they ran a Mentoring Children of Prisoners program. I managed that program for about 3 years. I'd say we saw close to 300 kids. And the biggest issue, I'll be honest with you, is part of my job was to find matches. So I have this child. I need to go out into the community, churches, schools, volunteer websites, try to find a perfect match for the child. One of the requirements is that they're gender matched, so female with female, male with male. And the biggest issue I had in those 3 years that I was there is finding male mentors. So while our list of keiki who are female was short, the list for the male keiki are really long. And so I had to kind of do some negotiating with my boss and saying, hey, I'm having a really hard time finding male mentors. Is it okay if I pair them with a female? Right. So I think there's a huge need for males in our community to step up and to help alleviate this issue.
Our neighborhood places serve about it's anywhere from 375 to 500 families a year in the community-based settings. Okay. And I've been asking them to start keeping numbers and track of the number of those families, how many are impacted by incarceration. So the data, again, is for us is going to be very important to start collecting there. But what we do is we just try, and we're not so much direct service the child, but trying to get the families, the caregivers and the parents more skills in parenting, so the abuse and neglect risk factors get minimized, and we can help instill in these families more protective factors, socialization skills, nurturing, all of those things that most families take for granted. Well, the families we work with, unfortunately, are facing some major problems with housing, homelessness, substance abuse, health problems, unemployment. So, the risk factors are tremendous. So we try through our different services, including a really promising practice called Kamalama, which is it's a Hawaiian value-based parent training program, where we try and reach the parents and say, hey, and try and transform their parenting behaviors from one real negative to more positive approach to parenting with their children. So we try and address children and keep them out of trouble by strengthening their parents, actually.
And that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like healing someone from the inside first, and then instead of the outside in. Yeah. Okay, so specifically, let's talk about outcomes and what you've seen with some children. Do you have any success stories? And the second kind of follow-up question I want to use is, how much follow-up is going to be required to keep these kids on the right track once you've started with them?
You want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to when I was working direct practice with these kids a few years ago, and I don't know if you heard of the Kauai longitudinal study, but it was a study that started, I believe, in the 70s, where they followed every child that was born on Kauai in that year through adulthood. And then one thing that they found is that if they had at least one positive adult role model in their life, not that they would be millionaires, successful business people, but they would be okay.
Right.
They would divert themselves from any kind of criminal behavior, stuff like that. So through the mentoring program, I kind of use that as the foundation of where we're going. So I had a lot of kids who had one parent incarcerated. The other parent was there, maybe not in their full capacity, but there.
Right.
And so we pair them with a mentor. I tracked that mentorship for at least 1 year. We asked the mentors to commit at least 1 year to these kids.
Right.
And honestly, more often than not, they stayed for many, many years. And the results are just profound. They're positive now. They have self-confidence. They're comfortable in their own skin. They know who they are, where they came from. And I think a lot of it has to do with a cultural foundation as well. A lot of the kids that we served were Native Hawaiian. And lacking that piece of connection to the aina, to this place, to their family. So I think coupled with the mentor and the cultural practices, values, principles, it's a good thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we have there has been basically health studies that show that having an incarcerated parent is an adverse childhood experience for children.
ACE. That's right.
It's an ACE. They call it an ACE.
Yeah.
And it ranks right up there with the death or the death of a parent or a divorce of their parents. It ranks right up there as an adverse experience. And the more adverse experiences you have, as you might assume, the chances of that child becoming antisocial and exhibiting deviant behavior and so on and so forth are just increase, multifold. Children, however, are really resilient,
Right.
and what we try and do through our services, and we need more of them, is to try and help them become more resilient and to strengthen what they already have. Kukuna is right. I mean, what we need to do, and what's been showing result in these children's lives is if there is one person that cares about them and shows them that they care about them, they can make a total difference in the outcomes of these children's lives. I had just a real last year's conference with Kekioka Aina. And I don't know if I should share this, but Augie Toba, Augie T, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shared a real funny but poignant story about how he grew up as a child of an incarcerated parent.
Oh, okay.
And how he was sort of heading down the wrong path as a 12, 13-year-old. And he was at Dole Intermediate School, mouthy already, right? And we all know Augie's so funny today and got the fastest mouth in the world, right? A great guy, but he always sat in the class, and he shared this story about Mrs. Murakami, his teacher, that I will never forget. Because he's in the class, she's trying to teach, and he's chattering away, right, in the back. Right? And she finally, I guess one day said, okay, I got to turn this around, right? And she said, Augie, come up to the front of the class. And so he went up to the class, and she goes, okay, just entertain the class. Go ahead. You're entertaining us from the back. I want to do it from the front of the room, right? And he said, from that point on, it was like she encouraged him to use his skills as an entertainer, basically, in a positive way, and how that interest in him kind of like transformed his behavior. Yeah. So I think it was a really important story for all of us to know that children that need help, if there's one person that can make a difference in their lives, that person becomes really important.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that the mentors actually stick around after a year, because I mean, when you spend a year with somebody and you grow with them, and you kind of fall in love with that person a little bit, and you care about them.
Absolutely.
You don't want to let them go.
Absolutely.
You don't want to let them down.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what they need, especially these kids. They need to see someone who's not going to just
Yeah,
leave and not let them
they
down.
look at really positive role models,
Yeah.
you know, and I think they turn on to it, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's switch the conversation here and let's talk about our current system, okay? And then just everything that it is, the criminal justice system, how they treat the kids, how we treat the kids. How is the current system, in your opinion, working for or against these at-risk kids? Is it making it more likely they will become incarcerated, or are the programs successfully changing the outcomes for this population?
You know, in child welfare, I pointed out earlier about a reform movement happening way back, and I think there's hope. I see the government beginning to realize that we need to change the way we provide services to children and families. We need to move more toward community-based type services, and providing these services not in a vacuum, not in a clinic of some kind, but having them right where they live and try and make a difference right there in their backyards, to speak, right? So I'm hoping and that what we're going to see, and through some of the advocacy work that we're doing now, we're going to see more support for promising practices on a community base that can serve both the children and the families.
Okay, good. Kukuna, do you have anything you want to add about it?
I mean, my perception of how it is now
Yeah.
is mirrors Steve's. It's not that there's nothing going on, but it's not that there's everything going on. I think there's a bunch of organizations, programs, agencies that are attempting to tackle this issue. I think our job is to talk to each other, really, to see what each other is doing, see what's working, see what's not working, and kind of get everybody on the same page. I think we all know that collaboration is a good thing, that when you collaborate, that things happen, things change. So I agree with Steve that the state, I think legislators are really paying attention now and seeing the difference that it could make.
Right.
There's a bunch of wonderful programs already operating right now. Just on the Leeward Coast, Mao Farms, you familiar with Mao
Yeah, of
Farms?
course.
Where they're using they're doing goal setting with the children that want to go to college, and they're using the farming as a means to them getting to farming, also learning skills and life skills. The other program out there that's fantastic is Kaala Farms, where Eric Enos brings school-age children up to the farm, and they get dirty in the lo'i planting kalo, and they restore and they habitats, and they do some basic farming as a way to just kind of like use land-based and ocean-based sites as a way to heal and also to provide skills, right, and to strengthen them. With another really wonderful program on the windward side is Papahana Kuaola is called. It's a site up in Haiku Valley where very similar. It's culturally based, Hawaiian culturally based sites where you bring parents and children together, and you try and find ways where they can bond and work with each other in a social setting.
Okay. Well, we will be right back after these messages with Steve and Kukuna. My name is Aaron Wills, and this is Rehabilitation Coming Soon.
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness. I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
Design and the
Okay, here we
programming.
go. And welcome back. I'm Aaron Wills. This is Rehabilitation Coming Soon, and we are discussing children of incarcerated parents with Steve Morse and Kukuna Yoshimoto. So I just wanted to kind of circle this back around to your program and ask you, how do you think your program in particular, you can talk about, I know you're involved with a lot of programs here, which ones that you think that are going to really have an effect on breaking this cycle of incarceration?
The one that I mentioned earlier, our parent training one called Kamalama is shows tremendous promise, not just in working with parents, but in working with the ex-offenders. We were just on Maui visiting our Wailuku neighborhood place, and Pastor Greg Dela Cruz, one of our workers in the neighborhood place of Wailuku, is using Kamalama as a way to work with ex-offenders coming out of Maui CCC.
Okay.
And we just had firsthand testimony just a few weeks ago when we were there visiting, doing our site monitoring work, where a couple of ex-offenders came to our meeting and described the behavior transformation that has, how they were transformed them from being very violent, aggressive, just out of sorts individuals, to being more at peace with themselves. I asked them the question about, and what's wonderful about Kamalama is the fact that it uses Hawaiian values as a way to transform. So it's not changing them from the outside. It's instilling those values and knowledge in them and helping them transform from the inside out. And these two young men basically talked about how it's changed their life. One of them basically was in a situation where the judge was ready to lock him up and throw the key away because he had been in trouble. And he was only, 21 years old?
Young guy.
Young guy. And they were just going to lock him up. And she just said, I see something in you that I really believe in. I'm going to give you one more chance. And fortunately, he got into Greg's classes and has transformed. I think Kamalama is if we have a great promising practice and that needs support, I think that's going to be it. I have great faith that our work with the Pu'uhonua group is going to bring about some best practices as well in working with children and families.
Okay. And Kukuna, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the federal grant that you just wrote in Act 117. Can you explain that a little bit more and what that's about?
Sure. So the purpose of Act 117, Session Laws of Hawaii 2012, is to reduce recidivism, prevent crime, and ensure long-term positive change by developing a plan to create a wellness center that reestablishes highly recognized Native Hawaiian cultural practices to restore the overall well-being of persons, families, and Native Hawaiian community. The second purpose is to create a pilot program to allow incarcerated persons on Hawaii Island to work in the community on community projects that benefit the local community and state. The ANA, or Administration for Native American Grant, that we submitted addresses the first purpose.
Okay.
And basically it's to flesh out what Act 117 means, try to come up with a plan. The main purpose, again, is to create a core curriculum. That core curriculum will then hopefully be the jumping off point for organizations, programs, public safety to accept, and we can get in there and work in the prison. That's kind of one of our long-term goals, is to be able to provide this program curriculum to folks inside the prison. But as it is now, we're looking at running a pilot program with folks that are on parole or furlough.
Okay. And are you guys working with DPS currently right now, or are they kind of just in the wings waiting for everything?
They're kind of waiting to see where our curriculum, they basically said it sounds like a good program, but come to us when you got the curriculum developed, and we'll take a look at it.
Okay.
You know, I think they'd welcome, you know, any kind of program service that, you know, that shows some promise.
Okay.
But you know, they have not committed to anything yet. So yeah, we'll see.
How close are you guys to finishing up with the curriculum?
I would say, I mean, notwithstanding A&A funding, I mean, if we get it, fine. If not, we're just gonna keep going with
Okay.
it. We have a couple of other grant applications in the hopper. One to the state legislature for a grant in aid, and we've submitted one to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So we're going to continue. The group has basically committed itself to finishing this work. You know, just with or without funding, we're just gonna keep plowing away. The funding will just help us do it faster, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But
Well, I
we're
hope
hoping a year or two, we'll have something completed in a year or two.
Oh, absolutely. I hope
Yeah.
you guys get the funding too. You guys are doing great
Oh,
work.
thank
you.
know,
Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
we need your guys' programs out there because, as you know, there's a huge problem. And, you know, kind of just transition this into how we've been tying all of these shows together is recently the governor is now considering, and as you're well aware of, building a new OCCC and building a new jail out in Maui, which you brought up. Now, this is much needed. It's long overdue. We brought up some statistics last time, explained that, you know, some of the parts of OCCC were built in 1916. So it's, you know, the infrastructure in and of itself just needs to be redone. What are your thoughts on this new jail? And what do you think the state should do as far as allowing this jail to be built by CCA?
Ooh, loaded question. I'm hoping that they put more money into developing the community. If we're going to end mass incarceration, then what we have to do is create those alternatives.
Right.
And we need the alternatives that show the best promise are those value-based, not just Hawaiian value, but universal value-based community programs that are showing they're making a difference. With that said, I'm hoping that within the design of those prisons, that they accommodate the thought of building spaces where you can build a pu'uhonua space.
Right.
You can
Okay.
build a space where offenders can transition from one place, and as they prove themselves and as they are willing to move into value-based programs, they can transition into the programs almost seamlessly. And I'm hoping they basically allow for design features in those prisons to allow that to happen. If they're just going to use it to build another warehouse with bars and concrete, then we're not going to solve the problems long term.
Right.
As for CCA, I don't have much faith that they'll be able to do. I don't have much faith that they're rehabilitating our men in Saguaro right
Yeah.
now. I've been there a couple times. The facility looks wonderful in terms of the security bells and whistles, but it's still a prison. As I call it all the time, the doors still clang behind you when you walk through. They talk about, and again, I hope they put more money into programs, but community corporations, community corrections, is a for-profit entity.
Yeah.
And as long as you have a for-profit entity, I don't see them having much incentive rehabilitating and ending mass offenders and ending mass incarceration. Like we talked about earlier today, they want to make sure they're maxing out their bed space, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then that's all contract driven. I mean,
Yeah.
and especially with the state of Hawaii, if the bed space isn't full, well, then they're in violation of the contract. And then in breach of the contract,
Yeah.
basically, NCCA can turn around and sue them. On that incentive, then the state has to, not approve all the paroles, keep people in bed space, don't go to programs, stay longer. Because if not, then they're in
Yeah.
violation of a contract with CCA. And that's the wrong kind of incentive to have when you're, working with jails and populations of people that you don't want to be there long term. You want them in, out, and never to come back,
Security is, I know, primary issue, but we need to begin looking at transforming And I think Bob Morse talked about Norway, and
Yeah.
and the ACOs there are really not ACOs; they're more like social workers, right?
Yes, yes, that's right.
And I think, and I'm not sure that that's ever going to happen here with, but you know what we need to do is provide people and positions in the prisons where the role models, the mentors, the social workers that work with these folks on a daily basis,
Right.
and try and help them again transform behavior, heal the anger, transform behavior. You know.
And one of the things I was impressed about with the Norway system was just what you were referring to. The ACOs have to go through an academy for 2 years, and they're taught psychology, social work, interactions, how to interact with people correctly, how to interact with prisoners, which is different than just regular people. And then what happens to them is when they go, and actually they graduate, and they go into the penal system there, they have to work their way up to what they call a contact officer. So you're not just thrown in with the wolves and say, here's your first day, you get to meet your prisoners and everything. No, they don't get to meet or contact any of the prisoners until they work themselves into it. It may be 2.5 years before they actually, you know, have face-to-face contact with the actual prisoners. Our system right now is just based on, you know, the lowest cost that we can pay somebody, you know, and I know CCA has done this before. They advertise on Craigslist between $8.50 an hour and $12.50 an hour, and that's the kind of what you're going to get. And as soon as you pass the background check and stuff, you're thrown in, and then you're guarding people.
Yeah.
And that's not the kind of people, if you want results where people come out rehabilitated, someone you want to live next door as your neighbor, that's not the kind of results you're going to get from that system.
I saw too much of like a SWAT mentality at Saguaro, you know, and you need a more healing and more, you know, there's going to be the real violent guys that you need to, you know, pay some extra security. But, you know, again, we're talking 75% of those folks in there are in there pretty much because of substance abuse, right?
That's right.
And I think that's, you know, they should be in community-based treatment centers and settings where, you know, they can deal with the real causes of their problems, you know.
Dr. Chesney-Lynn said something really bold last time. She said, you know, along the lines of nonviolent offenders, she said, well, right now what we could do is release every single woman out of the women's prison because most of them are just drug offenders or, you know, status offenders, but they're not violent and they're not a community risk. And so there's 200 people we're housing over there, women with children, and then as you know,
we heard there were 400 yesterday. We were at visiting a program.
Fernhurst.
For the Fernhurst YWCA, they used to be TJ Mahoney.
Oh, okay.
They're called Kahali Ho'ola Nona Wahine right now. It's a halfway house where they're taking women from the women's prison who are 6 months away from exiting, and they're putting them into a halfway situation. Awesome program, but they're talking about it being 400 now, the population there.
Well, we have lots of problems with the criminal justice system. I think we have some great solutions. You guys are a part of the solution, and I'm glad you guys came on the show to share with us. So
thank you for having us. We're going to keep hammering away.
Yes, thank you. Please do. And regardless, and I love your attitude, because regardless of the funding, we're going to keep going. So I love that. So anyway, so join us next week as we continue to discuss mass incarceration practice of the United States, and in particular, those effect on the practices of the state of Hawaii. And stay tuned. Coming up next is Sustainable Hawaii with Kirsten Turner.